Hi, everyone. So nice to meet you guys all.
Yeah. Hi. So let me still introduce Wenqian. So again, this is our lecture of the day, Wenqian. This is already the third of the three-part series that we talk about how the Chinese drink tea throughout the history. We have now finally arrived to the modern time. Wenqian is a lecturer at Anhui Agricultural University. She actually teaches classes on Chinese tea culture and history. So we're very glad to have her here today. Wenqian, would you like to also briefly introduce yourself?
Okay, hi everyone. I'm Wenqian. I'm Wenqian Jiang. Also, you can call me Amber if you. It's just easier for you guys. And I'm a lecturer from Anhui Agricultural University. Anhui is a central province in China mainland area, and I study in tea science for over 15 years. Wow, what a long time now. And I had a master's degree on tea science, specifically on tea culture and history. So I think I may have something interesting for you guys to share about tea, how Chinese people drink tea throughout history. And so today we're going finally moving forward to the closest time to us and how our tea drinking habits actually, especially for modern Chinese people, is used to be shaped. And thank you for Shuna. Thank you for everyone. Now I will start my sharing, starting from introducing our two chapters still for today. So for today, our two chapters are actually comparatively very short to the previous talks. In our previous talk, each chapter will probably have the time gap between 200 years to even 400 years long. And there's a very long time and so many confusing things and things you guys may not be very familiar with, especially if you don't know too much about the Chinese history. And always remember that those timelines and time gaps and also the historical incidents is actually very hard even for Chinese people to understand because too many things happened in our too long history. And so today we're going to get into the time era, to the times that are very close to us and probably will be more familiar for you guys. And for the modern times, for our timeline, as a heads up, I separated the time. I devised the time to two chapters from 1840s to 1949, and from contemporary for the contemporary times. I started from 1949 to present days. And this division way is specifically applied to Chinese history, maybe not very familiar for you guys. Just remember every timeline and time division is actually based on the incident in history. And for Chinese people, there are several history events that's very memorialized. It's very important and unforgettable. So we use that as our time stop. So of course, before we jump into the two chapters, we're going to have a little bit of reviewing from our previous talk about the Ming Dynasty and Qing Dynasty. Start from from the 14th century to to the beginning of 20th century, and in those periods, history and incidents such as abolish tea cakes processing in early Ming Dynasty, which is 1319 AD. It's a very long time ago, and the first emperor of Ming Dynasty, who gave the ban for the tea cake processing and only allowed the royal family or the royal court to demand for the loose tea. And this changed the tea industry very greatly to the future tea processing. And in Ming Dynasty, there are also some other tea kinds actually being merged, like the hei cha, or someone would call Chinese dark tea. And if you like to drink some like Chinese ripe pu'er tea, or the shu pu'er, you'll be very familiar with that kind of product. And this is actually after composing or the piling up process will have the very different feature from the green tea. And the yellow tea may be probably very unfamiliar for you guys. And also the scented tea like jasmine tea or the rosin tea or the orchid flower tea or some other scented tea. And in Qing dynasty, which is a much more vast changing period in Chinese tea history, and there are three major tea types we drink nowadays have been invented or innovated, like black tea, also known as bohi or 中国红茶, which is directly translation is red tea, and oolong tea, which is also very familiar, very famous, and also oolong tea, and it comes with its own making style or tea infusing style. It's called kung fu tea. It's now adopted and changed and adopted by the modern Chinese people. And also white tea, which is also very famous and popular recent years, based on some technological technology in infusion or in the other processing we'll talk about later. And tea drinking styles in Ming and Qing dynasty, which is actually is quite close, because during that time period, the pao cha, the steeping style of drinking tea, is basically the same. Of course, in Qing dynasty, there are a few new tea utensils being invented, like gaiwan cup, like here, and also the kung fu style also had emerged with very interesting, very artistic teapots, like also made from yixing. So, which is those time era, the modern Chinese tea utensil processing, manufacturing already have the same picture from then to now, like the yixing zisha, like the red clay or the purple clay, someone may call it. It's a fine clay, and that can be used for teapots, and also the porcelain teapots or porcelain cups from Jingdezhen, which the most famous one, of course, it's blue-white porcelain. It can be used for teacups, it can be used for teapots, everything, and also the gaiwan cup we just mentioned. So the tea drinking styles in Qing dynasty and Ming dynasty are basically the same. For some border area and minority people who lived there, they adopted, they more welcome to the 煮茶 style, which is boiling the tea in the big pot or somehow the vessel, and using other ingredients such as milk, meat, and even the Chinese cheese, like Mongolian cheese, which is mostly sweet instead of salty, and it's very tasty. Yet it's mostly for the nutrition absorption or other just living needs. And the pao cha style, mostly adopted by the Han people or the majority, especially nowadays, majority part of Chinese people, and there are inspiration of the kung fu tea, like what we had saw with the teapot and several separated cups. And from Ming dynasty, the tea artist or the tea expert started to notice about the environment for drinking tea and how people enjoy their tea drinking activity, public or just single serving way, and they always have this. They already have this different tea activity in the natural sceneries and their own tea pavilion, which is unique time era in Ming dynasty specifically, and also the combining the tea drinking space with their own study room for the Chinese scholars are more popular since for Chinese tea culture or in Chinese general traditional culture, tea is more close to the wisdom, and the wine or the alcohol is more close to the romantic and passionate. So that is why maybe that. Oh, Shunan, you just mute yourself. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. I just thought it sounded maybe better. Yeah, I wanted to say, in Chinese culture, we think that tea is for wisdom and the wine is for passion and desires, which both are, part of human nature, but somehow we think, wisdom and intellectual desires is a little bit higher than our like carnal desires.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. One will just simplify that signal for the personal desire, but T may have given the intellectual desire or the intellectual progress better kick. So, and in Qing Dynasty, the most, I think the most eye-catching event or the eye-catching progress is actually the consumption extension from elite only to all classes people drinking. So we can see, especially probably in Beijing city or in Tianjin city, in the northern part of China, you will see a lot of cultural renaissance back to the dedicated to the Qing dynasty. So you can see a lot of tea houses totally different from the southern parts of tea houses, for like in Guangzhou or in Chengdu city, in Hangzhou city, where the tea is more connected to the to a more dedicated lifestyle. In Beijing and in northern part of China, the tea house is more close to just a very how to say this crowded and yet very passionate lifestyle, just drinking tea and watching the Peking opera, or
playing mahjong now.
Yeah.
Yeah, and actually the tea house culture is still very much alive, especially like Wenqian mentioned in like Sichuan province.
Yeah.
And I remember this is already a few years ago, I saw a news article talking about how so many of these traditional tea houses, traditional, what we mean by, since Qing dynasty, basically, so the continuity of what we see on this slide. So they're talking about how these tea houses hasn't raised their price for so long, and because the majority of their customers are seniors. And they decided to raise the price, and I think they were raising from either 1 or 2 RMB to 5 RMB per head. And then the seniors complain so much because now they cannot afford to go to these tea houses every day. And to just give you a perspective, Starbucks, I think the cheapest Starbucks coffee costs like 18 RMB. So like even when they raise from 1 RMB to 5 RMB, it's still, but it's just such a small ticket price to pay. And a lot of the traditional art forms, such as the traditional storytelling, the one-man opera performance, the drum performance, these kind of things, they're disappearing arts, and it's only in these tea houses that they still can find an audience. So yeah, so it's a very unique culture. So if next time you go to China, especially you go to Sichuan, and you encounter one of the tea houses, I highly recommend you go in, because with the rising prices and everything, I'm not sure how long it'll still keep going, but it's definitely something that's very unique and very culturally significant.
Well, as a Sichuanese, actually I'm Sichuanese. My father's parents, my grandparents actually came from the Sichuan province, and I recent visit back to my old hometown. Don't worry actually you don't have to worry about the disappearing for the traditional tea houses or traditional art forms that have been disappearing from the only can be seen tea house. Don't worry about that. 5 RMB, of course, this raising time caused a lot of complaint, but maybe like 3 to 5 months later, the old generation, the seniors, still flooded in, and it's kind of like the younger generation for my age or even younger actually is now starting to embrace all this tea houses and art forms. They went to the tea house directly themselves, such as Debunking, a tea house, and also
I think that they did an excellent job. Revive this.
Yeah, and also if you actually go to Chengdu's tea houses, start to learn mahjong from now. That's a very unique thing. Like I used to went to tea houses located in a temple, a Buddhism temple, and I can hear the mahjong noise from like 50 meters away at least inside a temple. That's very unique. I can only see in Chengdu City mahjong and tea.
Yeah.
Okay. After a short review, let's go back. Let's go to our today's chapters, 5 in the modern times, which according to Chinese historian division, it's like start from the 1840 to 1949. And the reason that the Chinese modern time actually being caught from the 1840 is because the symbolization incidents of Opium War first. Before the Opium War, what we can see for the Qing dynasty regime is actually they're going to a very good life actually to them, because their trade surplus. The Chinese people or Chinese government is actually earning a lot of money, which can only be paid by the silver, and for that kind of the trade surplus, which is not very welcome for the Western the Western colonists. And so they decide, especially mostly noticeable like the Great Britain people, the British people started to trade opium with tea. So there's a saying, or being written by a lot of the authors and the historians about the comparing between the tea and opium, amount of which Professor Zhong Weiming, who's working in the Tsinghua University, who wrote a book about the tea and opium, specifically on the China in process of globalization in the 19th century. This is published in recent years, and I've read it, and it's very interesting, the comparison between the tea and opium. And although I find it itself is a little bit weak, for the evidence chain for the tea actually caused the Opium War, because tea is not the only product that the Western colonist is buying from China. It's only one of them. It's, of course, it's symbolizing and can be using as a comparison for opium, which is both for the luxury enjoyment. But tea is not the only one. There are among tea, and there are silks, and there are porcelain goods, and other things. So it's a general picture for the Chinese, for the Qing dynasty regime's trade surplus, and causing the British colonists, or the general Western colonists, including American, after the Opium War, after foundation of the U.S. So for the trade between the opium and the tea is not just directly exchange from opium to tea, it's exchange from opium to other goods. And the opium, of course, as a drug or addictive drug, had already been banned for the Chinese government long before the Opium War. But still, there are smugglers, there are Chinese people who are trying to also make profits from this illegal trade. And yes. So
smugglers basically are some of the members of the royal family and the government.
Yeah, so the government said no, and the people just said, oh, well, maybe, since you cannot know me for what I'm actually doing. So there are still a little smuggling, not very little, actually a lot of smuggling, and the local governments trying to turn the blind eye on it. It's not successfully. So the central government said you have to ban it directly. So, and also that actually triggers the anger from the Western colonists. So there's a war, official war for Opium War. Surprisingly, the Opium War is actually a very short war in the history. It's not very long one like the World War I or World War II. It's not that long. It's actually quite short compared to those long wars or the very attractive wars. And this actually did not cause a lot of, it's not caused the most trouble for the Qing regime, but it's a symbol for the Chinese people to realize that China is no longer the center of the world, which is never was. Of course, there are some leading advantages from China as an economic body, but then after the Opium War first, it's gone. The Chinese people started waking up, and this is what RT history studiers will just taking as a dawn for the modernization of tea, because before the Opium War, before the stepping with British colonists or the other Western powers. But for the Western powers, the Chinese people did not really have the need to modernize everything in our own lines, especially for agricultural product like tea. I'm not saying this invasion or the exploiting is good, but objectively, there are some efforts that also a waking call for us. It's painful, but still a waking call. And after the Opium War, with the opening for the Chinese mainland to the British people or to the Western powers, the plant hunters like Robert Fortune, who brought the tea leaves, brought the tea plant and employing the tea makers to tea workers to the Indian, to the colonial Indian, and to start the British tea plantations. This is very reasonable, and also Robert Fortune, who himself is a very legendary person. You can see he totally is a Caucasian face, and he trying to getting himself some disguise and blend in completely into the Fujian tea farmers. He at first he doesn't know the dialects, he doesn't know the language, but he still managed a way to get close to the tea workers and tea farmers and tea store owners. And he trying to travel, and he traveled from Fujian province to Anhui province also, which where I live in now. And he traveled to the Yunnan province as well for his following his step, a lot of tea breeds and some of the tea makers actually follow his lead, and employed by himself and then later by the Honorable Eastern Indian Company, and trying to start the tea plantation in the in India area territory, and most notably one is the Assam area, which is now still the the biggest black tea manufacturing center of the world, and it locates in the eastern north of India, and just right next to China. It's, some parts of it is close together, and when Robert Fortune actually got there, he found that the weather and climates in the Assam area is quite close to China area like Fujian, Guangdong, and the Yunnan province. Is quite similar, and it's in the southern part of Himalaya mountain. And he gave out, he settled the tea workers, and he tried to plant the tea seeds. At the beginning, it's very small plantation, and then grow up, and also with the management and the control of the British people, and who already have the industrial concept for tea processing, and very quickly the Chinese tea trades and Chinese tea goods facing the competition facing competition of the product from India, the colonial Indian plantations, and Japan and other countries who had stepped into the modernization and industrialization far before our Chinese people. And for some I think it's like beginning of the 20th century, some tales or some legends or myths being told across the world that the Assam area or India is actually the origin of tea plant, because some British colonel who found accidentally a big tea tree, a big wild tea tree, just shaped not like bush type, not like bush shaped, it's like arbor shaped big tea tree. So that was the first actual evidence that there are wild tea trees in Indian area, like in Assam area. So some of the advertiser or some of the worker probably in for the Eastern Indian Company, that just spread out the rumor that tea actually started from India, which is actually not correct. Because it's being proved wrong by lots of the scientific evidence, including genetic evidence, and also other botanic evidence that Assamica variety or Camellia assamica is actually a variety from from the Camellia sinensis, which actually the Chinese tea. It's been already proved. So yeah.
Yeah, and I just wanted also to add a little bit that I think because we sometimes also see this question raised a lot. That people ask, is this the cultivar assamica or it's all the other Camellia sinensis? It's actually, you know, I think this has to do with long time ago when the Western scientists first encountered tea. This was during the time that people didn't even know that green tea and red tea or black tea are actually all made from the same plant. Due to this vast misunderstanding of what tea actually is, people actually thought that all the teas that come from China is one cultivar. And then there's another cultivar that is native to Assam. But in fact, just in China, there are probably thousands of cultivars, right? Last time I checked, just the National Tea Research Institute, the ones they have documented, there were over 300 of them. And in each province, different university, they also document and record their own cultivars. So there's no such thing as the cultivar assamica versus everything else in Camellia sinensis. It's actually just one of the thousands that's belongs to Camellia sinensis. And I think this is very important. A lot of the references that people quote are very, very old researches. It's almost like taking some really old, almost primitive science ideas from like Aristotle era, and then try to prove today's phenomena. A lot of new discoveries and new science papers have come around, and this is not even that new, right? It's already been decades. So yeah, so I just wanted to mention that because I think it's still a very much an ongoing confusion.
Yeah, if anyone want to further study about this part, you can Google the origin of genetic evidence for the tea trees, cultivars, and tea other varieties. If you have some question about the arbor-shaped tea or arbor-looked tea trees or the bush-looked tea trees and their genetic differences and similarities, you can Google that. And I think it's a very interesting reading material if you liked it. And of course, let's go on. So during the modern times before the 1949, or facing the competition of the the competition for the Chinese tea against the Indian and other countries' tea, there are lots of innovation being made for the tea product. Taking black tea or Chinese Hongcha, red tea as example, at first, before the mid of the 19th century, there are only almost one type of black tea exporting from China to European countries or to the Western countries. That is Lepsan Souchong, which is known to Chinese people as Zhengshan Xiaozhong in the Mandarin speaking, and in dialect of Fujian province is Lepsan Souchong. So it's direct translation from the sound of the dialect. And from Lepsan Souchong, there are two other most famous innovation of the black tea. One is from Kinmen black tea. One's called Kinmen black tea, made in Anhui province, in the southern Anhui province, inside Huangshan mountainous area. And another is Jiuqu Hongmei. I don't know what exact translation in old times for the Zhejiang province people. And Jiuqu Hongmei is also try out to use the material that used to made for the Longjing, the dragon well green tea, to manufacture, to process to the black tea, and with the rolling, and you can see the similarity between the Jiuqu Hongmei and Lepsan Souchong. This is definitely a imitation from to the Lepsan Souchong, using the material in Zhejiang province in Hangzhou area, which is used to be made for the dragon well, the green tea. And Kinmen black tea is actually the one step forward, or another kind of upgrading the material processing skills, not just only being made, not just being only invented by one person, namely Yu Ganchen, who's now being named or being nominated as the most famous tea innovator for the Kim black tea. The major person who has been credited for all the credit for the making of inventing of the Kim black tea. Actually, there are also other tea makers trying to use the processing skills like the Zhenghe Gongfu black tea, which is quite similar to Kim black tea. But the material in Kim, which is also used to be made for the green tea, now this is another like the alteration for the processing skills, and to using the leaves for the green tea and to trying to make the black tea. And this is actually a successful tryouts that give us the Kim black tea, which is that is known for its unique aroma. It's so unique, so it can only named after its location. It's called Qimenxiang, the aroma of Kim.
Yeah, basically they named the aroma after themselves. Yeah. Yeah, and just also want to mention that Kimen is the English name based on the name of the location, which is called Ximen in China. So you might have encountered a black tea or red tea from China called Ximen Hongcha, which we also often shorten it as Qihong. So take the one word from each of the phrase. And so Qihong, Ximen Hongcha, Kimen, they're the same thing. Even today in the Kimen area, people still make a lot of green tea. I think the aroma of the tea has a lot to do with the either the cultivar or their terroir, because even their black tea, even their green tea also has a very unique aroma that's very similar to the black tea that they have.
Yeah, some scientists will believe that the aroma, the Kimen tea or Ximen tea, also despite the green or the black ones, also have it because of their the specific variety cultivar. It's called Ximen Chuyezhong, and some scientists argue for the climate reason. Because the climate in the Qimen County is very unique. It was surrounded by mountains. It's very suitable for the tea trees to grow, and with its own genetic resources. So it just gave us a very unique tea experiences, drinking experience and smelling experiences for the Qimen aroma. And yeah.
Can we stop for a moment, because I see there are a lot of comments about the Lapsang Souchong or the Zhengshan Xiaozhou, and yes, whether or not it's supposed to be so smoky, and if it or is supposed to be not smoked, which one is more authentic, and questions like that. So I just want to take a moment to clarify. So Lapsang Souchong, but I'm going to use the Chinese name, which is Zhengshan Xiaozhou. It's both the name of a smoked red tea, and it's also the name of the cultivars of the region. But keep in mind, this is not a cultivar. This is not an asexual production cultivar. So it's not a single cultivar. It's actually a group of cultivars. You can consider them of the heirloom cultivars, right? It's like nature's blend. And they are usually what we call the small leaf cultivars. So xiaozhong, that's basically exactly what it means, small leaf. So because it's really the oldest red tea, so not only so they basically, the name means where the small leaf tea come from the mountain. So to emphasize the importance. So it's actually right now, so the tea needs to come from this village in China called Tongmu. It's actually China's most exclusive tea region. It's literally protected. It's a natural reserve. It has been closed to the public for many years now. You have to get police clearance before you can get in, and it's completely off limit to foreigners. A lot of times, what people have had either in Chinese restaurants or probably in grocery store, the very, very smoked Lapsang Souchong is not the real Lapsang Souchong. It's usually just taken the already made black tea and smoke it using a direct smoke method. However, in the actual area of Tongmu, where the tea is also smoked, keep in mind, Lapsang Souchong is a smoked tea. This is their most traditional form. However, it's actually smoked in a specially built house called, ironically called greenhouse. So there's a smokehouse called the greenhouse, Qinglou. By the way, Qinglou in Chinese also means a brothel. So just the confusion of the terminology. But anyway, it's a 3-story house that no one can live in because the flooring is completely by bamboo sheets and one can only walk on the beams, and people will burn smoke underneath the house, so the whole house is filled with smoke, and depends on the level of process that each batch is at. People will rotate the teas onto different levels of this greenhouse, and this process starts with fresh tea leaves. So because of this very long process, the smoke is very much inside, but yet at the same time, it's very, very mild. It should never overpower the natural sweetness that comes from a really, really well fermented tea. So I would highly recommend you try a real Epsom Sichuan, but do not let the inferior smoked ones, the super smoked ones deter you, because those are not the real ones anyway. It's a very unique tea region, but as you can guess, it's basically the difference between champagne versus your $3 bottle sparkling wine that's also called champagne. So it's not the same thing at all. The unsmoked version is actually very new. It only came in recent years.
Yes. And I think that the tea workers give the unsmoked one another name. It's called 赤干. The direct translation is the red dry tea.
Red sweet. Yeah, 赤干. I don't mean to advertise, but Tea Drug sells both real 正山小种 and 赤干.
It should be also a little mild smell. I liked it a lot, the traditional ones. So let's keep going. And for the initial industrialization for the tea in China, there are several tea experts who give a lot of efforts in this. For Mr. Wu Juenong and Hu Haochuan, who wrote the reviving plan for Chinese tea in Anhui province in 1935, they definitely went through a lot of setbacks and chaoses for the tea industry, because during that time, after the collapsing of Qing dynasty regime before 1949, there are no order in China's mainland area. There are a constant war between the warlords, and Anhui was occupied by several warlords before the occupation of the Nationalism Party regime and the final setting for the 1949. So there are lots of shutting down for tea business, also including the Sino-Japan War era. And during that time, before the invasion of Japan, they took some efforts to build up a tea experimental tea improving factory or yard. I think yard is better because Mr. Hu Haochuan, who is a very famous tea botanist, and he trying to make the tea, the Ximen black tea, which is the best or the biggest tea exportation before 1949 in China, and trying to maintain the processing and manufacturing of the Ximen black tea, and they also would like to want to use this Ximen sample for experimenting and improving for the tea industry as example. But however, due to a variety of the reasons, they failed academically. They failed, and also their tries and for the state-owned or state-controlled tea trade directly from the tea farmers and trying to protect them to the foreign buyers, and trying to get rid of the exploiting from the tea sellers and tea the tea sellers. But they also failed, not just because of the corruption of the government or by then, and also the limitation for their idealism to the realistic life. So all their tries are inventing veil, but still there is something trying to burst inside out, including the modern modern tea examination before they go to the international market, and the whole system of examination and evaluation is being has been set up by then during the very chaos time of China's how to say that, and also the birth time for the tea science, of the modern tea science. This is a picture of the first graduate students in the Fudan University who studies in the first Chinese tea science program in a college education level. This tea class did not start in the Shanghai, in Fudan University, where it locates now. It started from Chongqing during the Japan invasion. During Japan invasion war, or Sino-Japan war time. So this is a very unique era, and someone I only recognize this person, probably the founding father of Professor Chen Chuan, who is a founding person in the tea program in Anhui Agricultural University, where I went to as one of them. Another one who Professor Wang Zhenong, I didn't recognize him. Probably he's not in the picture, or probably I'm not very familiar with how they look in their 20s and 30s. Or probably, they're same age as I am now. So, well, every time I saw this history and picture is still very touching, and how they try to make efforts to build up a new tea science, which is now being promoted to a discipline, a third degree discipline in Chinese agricultural study realm. And also in Anhui Agricultural University, I have definitely the confidence to say that our tea science program is the best, because we have a state key laboratory for tea science and a whole branch of new combining the cutting edge scientific foundings in tea, and also genetic resources, genetic science, and other science connect to tea resources. So yes, I started learning tea from the very natural scientific part. And let's get back to how they drink tea. So how do you think the Chinese people would drink tea in a wartime? So the very easiest one. And in Mingguo era, what we called the modern time of China,
or the Republic time, basically.
Yeah. So the drinking tea is a very easy way, and during that time the tea jars has not been invented, and drinking tea is a very easy thing. And because drinking tea by then will just be only suffice for the basic need for drinking, instead of some of the cultural thinking. Yes, of course, there are some scholars, intellectors who wrote about the essays and the articles about how beautiful the drinking tea feeling is. Keep in mind that there are only this very rare elite in the society back to then. So for normal people, they drink tea probably like this. This is a video clip I cut it from the movie named Eternal Beloved, 爱有来生, that is directed by the leading female character, leading female.
So the lady is also the director, right?
Yeah, she's the director. You can see now. Sorry. And the story of this movie is not very easy to understand, even for Chinese people, I think. It's basically a love story. And she's now rinsing on the tea utensils and making tea for the lover of her.
And you can see her attire. If you recall what we saw for Tang and Song Dynasty, it has changed a lot. And this is very much due to the Manchu influence. So what she is wearing is a modified version of a traditional Manchu dress, which is very common for that era.
So just pouring out the tea for one cup to another cup, just drinking tea like this. It's a very easy one.
People use very big teapots, right? And even now they feel almost a symbol for almost everyday tea or poor man's tea, workers' tea, just like to symbolize a casual version of tea drinking. And we literally call it the big pot tea. So if you, so yeah, we're drinking big pot tea, then people sort of understand that, okay, this is like super casual, you know, half of the purpose is just to get hydrated kind of thing. Yeah.
Yeah. And after
the name of the movie again?
Oh, yes.
I'm gonna type it. All right. Got it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Okay, I already got the name. I typed it in the chat.
So I didn't watch it all over through, actually. It's a very long movie, and I'm not really into the love story. Okay, let's keep going to the contemporary part of tea drinking for Chinese people. So after the foundation of the PRC, we using this as another division time spot for the contemporary history for Chinese people. And from the, and of course, it's over 70 years longer, over 70 years long now. So in that 70 years, long, maybe not very long 70 years, but still very vast and rich 70 years, there are four stage, I think, can be a four-time stage for the tea industrial development. And the beginning is from 1949 to 1953. The Chinese people used, Chinese government, communist government used like 4 years to build up or restoration for the whole tea industrial. And then around using almost 3 decades of time to taking tea as a plant economic goods. And the tea is tea is a very important character for the exportation good and for exchanging for the foreign currency to build up the other heavy like the other industrial parts like the steel industry or other industries. And of course, Chinese people now still have this respect to their the tea farmers or other farmers because we know clearly that during the development of China, of the PRC, for like to nowadays, we owed a lot of debt to the farmers, the farmers, including tea farmers, who definitely gave out everything they can to support the other developments in other industry. And after the 1984, in that year, the Chinese government decided that tea is can be now released back to the free market and starting to reform this own system and scheme to giving back the decision right to the tea farmers and the tea tea factory owners to say which kind of tea they want and which kind of tea they want to sell to people. And this is a start for the, also this synchronized with the tea economic booming of Chinese people. And the Chinese people, or China does not need the initial agricultural product such as tea as the exporting resources come. So that is then the tea has been released back to the free market, and also a very important end for the plant economic in tea industry. And I think this kind of the reforming, giving back a lot of energy back to the tea industry and allowing people to rebuild their own tea factory basing on the owners or farmers' own thinking or their own minds. And after the and I also devised this time from 1984 to nowadays as using the 2005 as a the milestone, because during that year, this is a beginning of the magical for pu'er tea. Not just pu'er tea, it's also a symbol that there are capitalism or the consumerism step into the tea industry. And the tea, with the economic booming in other industry, like all the general economic booming in China, the Chinese people started to have more money to invest on their own luxury enjoyment, such as tea. And then there are lots of new inventions and rediscovery or recreation for the whole tea industry. And so we can see from the pictures above, we can see a very clear changing based on this tea processing lines. You can see a very obvious processing or improvement from the 1949 to now to present days. And of course, there are some kind of the unbalancing in different areas, like in Hunan or in Fujian province, versus in Yunnan provinces. And also, I think recent years, especially after the 2005, the consumerism did not just give all the good things to the tea industry. Also give out they also releasing some sort of very concerning signals, like some tea drinkers or tea lovers would not just will have this chasing drive, or the drive to looking for the scarcity of tea drinking. For some people, I think Shunai can feel with this with me. Someone would specifically looking for a pure handmade thing and willing to give out an overpriced money to the so-called initial or the primary or the 原始的 the flavor. It's totally irrational.
Yeah, totally. I mean, so in the current tea market, one thing we have to understand is that I think Chinese people are getting increasingly wealthier, and some of them have gotten ridiculously rich. And so oftentimes the people ask me whether or not the teas that they have will account as one of the best teas that China has. And I often feel bad to tell them, no, not at all, actually. Majority of the teas that I see in the States, even though they might say it's small batch, directly sourced and handmade from farmers and these kind of things, but it's at a totally different level of the actual top teas that Chinese have. And it's only reasonable to think that given how much capital are chasing all this tea, if there are people who shell out millions in China every year on teas. So to think that in a more normal price range for our everyday enjoyment, that this is actually the best teas is not really possible. On the other hand, so I will say this, and people often ask me about what price range will get me the best teas and things like that. I wouldn't view it that way. However, I would say that for a lot of good Chinese teas, they do start at a certain price point. So if you pay below that price point, you're guaranteed you're not having that tea. There's no such thing as you get so good a deal that you're paying way, way below market price. And the reason being that all tea prices actually start with the price of raw leaves. And raw leaves for a lot of regions are getting traded. It's impossible for anybody selling you the price that's lower than what they have paid or what have made on the price of the raw leaves. And raw leaves are strictly related with location. And this is why everything starts with location. So without the top terroir, you will not even get a chance to get what's called the best teas. However, on the other hand, paying the top price have no guarantee that you are getting the best teas. I have also tasted so many teas that I was so shocked that the people pay that much money for it, because it's just straight fraud. And I don't think this is a problem that's unique to the tea world, but definitely given how quickly wealth has been accumulated within China, how fast capital is getting injected into the tea market, and how because the thing is, tea has such a long history in China. It's very different from tea industry elsewhere in the world, where it kind of came in with a plan. You know, Chinese tea industry sort of like didn't have a plan, you know, and then we just like all of a sudden in the modern time, and now like what do we do with all this? So it has a much more organic emergence, and because of that, there are a lot of almost chaos in the market and in the information as well. So I would say, you know, set yourself a budget and kind of stick with that. Only try to seek the teas that you like the best within your budget, instead of trying to seek, I guess, the best tea or the most expensive tea. I will say, and it happens a lot with Chinese rich people. If you go into any tea region or any tea vendor and tell them, give me your most expensive tea, or I have all the money, I demand to have your best tea, you are guaranteed to not get the best tea. There's not a single farmer I know do not laugh at this kind of behavior. So either really, really know your stuff, invest in tea knowledge, and train your taste bud, or I would say just stick with your budget. That's probably better than anything else. All right, so enough of that, but I do want to say, comment on another thing about the era of planned economy. So this actually, you will still see the impact of this in the tea industry today, because this was the time where the farming was communal, right? So I often, when I teach tea classes, I often call this the communal farming era, just to give people a more direct sense instead of giving all the background history. And so the production is also communal. So because of this era, a lot of the modern day standard, almost like the ranking, the grading that we see, are basically remnants of this era. So this era is kind of significant, because even though now the tea production activity is pretty much privatized, however, we're basically still operate under some level of framework that was established during that era.
Yes, yes. And that is the reason why I took that time of planned economic time or communal time as my own study project in my master's degree. That's very fascinating, and how directly it changed our drinking habits and everything. But still, even during the planned economic time, there are lots of innovations. I only took 2 innovations for tea industry, especially for tea made to tea processings, like for technological convergence, like for pu'er tea. But this is of course relatively recent years. That happened in the 2010s. I think it's beginning of the 2010s, like 2011 or 12. Is the compressing the tea cakes with any kind of tea material, dry tea material. I mean, like dry tea product. Most successful ones is the 老白茶 or the 白茶, the white tea, to compress into the tea cakes, similar to pu'er tea. Since the pu'er tea became a big hit after the 2006 and 7, and almost since then, the advertisement for pu'er tea was just giving out the slogan that this is a drinkable antique. You can have it, even including the shu pu'er, the red pu'er tea, that is has this slogan for propaganda using by the capitalist or by the tea sellers by then, that the pu'er tea can be stored for over decades, over years and years, and for the long stored pu'er tea as a scarcity product for the market. Everyone is crazy about this. But after the I wouldn't say this recession, I wouldn't say this kind of like the fell down, or just natural how to say like people just losing their interest, or their reclaim to their own ration with the pu'er tea. And after this whole transmission, whole trend for pu'er tea, there's something being left still for other tea sellers or makers to using as their own new selling points, like for baicha by by early 2010s, first years of 2010s. There are some big storage for the for the white tea, and they cannot be sold for a very ideal price. So the some tea makers decided to imitate from the pu'er tea and compress the white tea into tea cakes. And still also just giving a new thought or putting a new thought into the mass people, the mass crowds, that the baicha, the white tea, can also, especially the old white tea or the used to be considered as the degraded white tea, 老白茶, as another new drinkable antique similar to pu'er tea. And suddenly, almost over one night or 2 nights.
Yes, exactly. Within months, the retail shops in this one township, which is the hub of fooding, tripled. Literally, like within the time of 3 months. It's so crazy. So all of a sudden, white tea from just being white tea, all of a sudden to almost another version of pu'er need to be pressed, and everybody is looking for some oat tea. Yeah, but this all happened really, really recent.
This is very, very recent, and also this is now being it's now being taught to students as a new success case for the technological convergence. But still, it caused a lot of concern because after the white tea compressed into tea cakes and got a really good reflection, there are lots of other tea types and tea sellers trying to imitate that. For instance, I used to see the little tea being compressed into tea balls, just like the chocolate balls, and the material was made from the 大红袍, not the very good not the very good quality ones, but just the general yancha, the rocky tea, like the Minbei oolong tea, North Fujian oolong tea, that been compressed into little tea balls into different shapes. This is trial, some success, some did not. And this, of course,
in our gimmicky tea session, so basically just keep in mind, there's still traditional teas exist. Yes. And for traditional regions, basically there's traditional teas and there are new teas, right? And if you find a new form of tea in the traditional region, it's basically the leftover of the traditional teas. So if you have a pressed cliff tea, no, do not let anyone ever tell you it's the top cliff tea. There's zero top cliff tea being pressed right now. I do not mean that in the future will not happen, but as of now, no, there's no such thing going on yet. And actually for white tea even, every year only the leftover tea, the teas that the first several rounds of selection could not happen, those are the teas that eventually get pressed. The top picks will not get pressed. And remember also these teas came from different level of customers. And basically, if you have a customer who have been enjoying tea and have been spending money since the 80s and the 90s and have been those tea connoisseurs, no, they're very conservative. These are not a customer who needs to be sold on the new trend. They will actually demand their tea to be just like how it is before. They'll only complain if you have lost this old flavor. So the nuanced teas are really for the newbies in the tea world. Mm-hmm. And but remember, the best teas still goes to these connoisseurs. So so follow the connoisseurs, not the trend.
Yeah. Okay. First, the technological convergence. Technological convergence is from compress everything to tea cakes. Some the example for like 老白茶, it did success, but some of course it failed. And there are also another kind of trying out, not just in the recent years. This is specifically example for using the material for the luang guapian green tea in Jinzhai County, Anhui Province, to make another new black tea or Hong Cha, named Jinzhai Hong, a kind of black tea. This is trials. It did not become a big hit on the market because it's a regional tea product only sold to specific local people. So and also this is not the first trying for the Luan for the Jinzhai people to trying to use green tea material to make black tea. They already tried this during the Planck-economic time, based on the direction or the orders from the authorities. Of course, they tried this, and sometimes I tried this tea myself. It's not bad. It's not bad. It's good. It's good tea, and but I don't believe it's going to be successful as a tea product for going to the bigger market because. Like Shunan said, for Jinzhai or other traditional tea regions, they had their own the major product for in Fuding is white tea, Bai Cha, and for in Luan City, Jinzhai County, it's green tea. It's Luan Guapian. So of course, there's still a big market for Luan Guapian. Why would the tea farmers switch this to directly switch or totally switch this to black tea? They will only use the unwanted tea materials. So for the tea roll leaves that are growing close to summertime, which definitely to be bitter and astringent, not very good quality for the green tea. So they collect the material, which is still usable but not just for the green tea, for the black tea. So that's also another answer for you guys to that kind of hides up that all 6 categories of tea, including the white tea, the green tea, the black tea, the Chinese dark tea, the hei cha, and the oolong tea, the yellow tea, can also be made from one batch of raw leaves. That difference is only caused by the processing flows and processing skills. Of course, there are adaptability for different cultivar. Some cultivar for like Luan's, that's basically good for the green tea, not very good for the black tea. But still, it can be made. It's not very tasty. It's not very bad, but it's not that good either. So that is why I don't believe this kind of the technological convergence will success. But still, this is a good. I think it's a kind of like good to try to innovate something. Even the failure of the innovation is still a success for letting people to know that the traditional ones are actually the good ones. That's another knowledge. Yeah.
Yeah, I totally agree, and I do want to you know, if you know me and know what Tea Drunk does, you know that we only do traditional. We only do teas that come from historical terroir, so historically famous and historical, but not historically famous like pu'er. These are they are actual categorizations of teas, right? So, and I always have a lot to say with these innovative teas that I don't think really is on par with the traditional teas in terms of their standards and making technique. You know, traditional teas just has such a long time of development. The level of rigorous is so different from all these new teas. However, I do not want to encourage this innovation at all. Actually, I think it's interesting. I just don't think they're yet at the same level to compete with the traditional teas, but they need to keep happening. And I always keep a very close eye on these kind of teas. You guys probably know that Shigan was actually, last year was the first year Tea Drunk started selling Shigan, which is the unsmoked Jingshan Xiaozhong. The reason we don't do that before, like I said before, because it was not a traditional tea. The technique was not mature. But I always try every year and trying to see how much it improves. And it's only when it finally, the technique and everything matures and it finally is kind of initiate itself into a competition with the traditional teas, then of course it's great. All great teas, all the historic teas that we enjoy nowadays, because somebody in the past has done the innovation, has put in the work, but also give it time to mature, to refine. It has to withstand time. Every year in China, we have so many innovation teas that comes and goes. Some of them appears, for 3-4 years, and then just disappears. So those are not the ones that that we want to be distracted with. Right? But still it's very important for those to keep happening and definitely remain watchful eyes on them. And hopefully, you know, our generation can also, you know, leave some awesome tea style for the future generations.
I liked it. I definitely liked it. I like to try out new things. Okay, after we think about the new things, let's talk about back to the cultural renaissance. And in the, I will personally take the whole era for the actual cultural renaissance for the Chinese society, including the Taiwan and Hong Kong and Taiwan region. And the first redefinition of the Chinese tea art is actually being redefined by the Taiwanese tea expert. For picture I showed of Professor Debunking, and who he traveled a lot between the Taiwan and the mainland area, and he is very familiar with both sides culture and traditional Chinese traditional culture, and very familiar with the society both sides. And he did a lot of effort to communicate two parts together, and alongside with my my advisor Professor Ding's efforts and other Chinese mainland tea experts, we now have this kind of Chinese tea art study realm for the recent Chinese tea drinking culture renaissance and rediscovery, and also innovation for this. And he, Professor Fan, and also other tea experts like Professor Cai Rongzhang and his wife, Professor Lin Ruixuan, also give out a lot of definition of Chinese tea arts. And most of these redefinition is actually following the traditional culture of tea drinking styles, including like what we saw in bowling styles, 泡煮茶 and or 煎茶 style, 点茶 style, and also Ming dynasty's 泡茶 style, Qing dynasties or Qing eras, Kung Fu tea styles. They have direct inheritance. You can see the similarity. You can see the identification. You can see the inheritance from the ancient times to now to present times. But I have to say, I have to give this confess, the name of Chinese tea art, 中华茶艺, the definition and the concept only emerged in the 1970s. So 1970s, with the economic booming in the Chinese society, including regions and countries in Singapore, like Singapore, Hong Kong, and Taiwan region, of course, there are renaissance of culture and lifestyles combined or follow up with the economic booming. So during that time, there are lots of innovations and also inheritance may have been made for redefinition of Chinese tea art and Chinese tea tourism or Chinese tea philosophy. There are lots of them. It's not directly or identical with the ancient ones that Lu Yu, the writer of Cha Jing, that lived in the Tang Dynasty in the 8th century. Oh no, sorry, in the 9th century, who gave out in the first tea book or tea encyclopedia called Cha Jing, the tea classic. It's not exact same. Of course, we inherit a lot from our traditions, but it's not exact same. And the word of 茶艺, the word of 茶艺, like in Chinese, direct translations, Chinese tea art or tea art, is a new concept. It's not that old, only like 40, 50 years old. So you can see now still the art form of tea art is still a very new one. And of course, they give out a lot of new tea utensils, such as what we now very familiar with, the gong dao bei, the fair mug or the tea jar, or and also the cha dao set. I don't know translate in English. It's just a set of accessory tools like tea scoop and the tea needles and teaspoons or the tea funnels and other accessory tools. They're rediscovered or recreate based on the traditional cultural inheritance, but it's not exact same. It's relatively new ones or very recent ones. So for like the tea jar, the fair mug, the gong dao bei, and the cha dao zu, all those sets are very recent years. Recent years until like 1990s, only 20, 30 years ago. So this is very new ones. And also the Wenxian sniffing cup, the slender ones on the left, these are also a very new event, in invention. My personal first experience for the Wenxiangbei, the sniffing cup, is in the mid of 1990s. My mother, who went to a business traveling a trip to the Fujian province, and she brought back a set of teacups, small and delicate, of course, very beautiful, but it's a new one. She said directly to me, this is a new invention from Taiwan region to Fujian, which is quite close together with only one, one channel across. So this is a very new one. This is a new innovation for the modern Chinese people. Of course, I understand the cultural habit for Chinese people would like to credit our own success or credits back to our own ancestors, and setting this to the ancestors, founding fathers of tea industry, living back 10th or 12th centuries ago. But this is not true. And I, as a historian student, I don't encourage people to do this because it's simply not true. The truth for this innovations of new utensils only happened 3 decades ago. So just let's face it. There's nothing shame to admit that. And I like this drive of innovation. And of course, after the 1990s, to present days, as Shona just mentioned, the Chinese people just grow a little bit wealthier, and there are new, and with their join up, the wealthy people or the newly wealthy people in China mainland area, and of course with the traditional culture form ourselves reserved together with our people in Hong Kong, in Taiwan region, we also trying to combine the tea art or the tea concept with other traditional culture, like what we showed in these pictures. Like from the left is the Chinese traditional flower arrangement art or flowering art, and together with the tea drinking to use these flowers, flower arrangements as environment improving and giving, and also kind of like symbol for the tea makers' thoughts or tea artist's thoughts for his or her own tea philosophy, thinkings, or logics, or other things. And also, of course, combine tea arts with other art forms, such including the instrument playing, like this is guqin. Used to merely disappear in the contemporary times, because the guqin, the instrument is very rare to know for modern Chinese people who maybe as my generation, because in our growing time, the instrument is more familiar to us as the piano, the Western classic instruments, and for Chinese food, Chinese guzheng, that's also a Chinese instrument. It's more popular, and guqin, which is not that popular, because guqin is the instrument is not for it's not for the concert or the audience playing. This instrument used to be specifically for the elite scholars who also have the time and money to nurturing their own art enjoyment. So just enjoy, play for themselves. It requires a lot of money and invest time and money as well. So this is not used to be very familiar for modern Chinese people. It's famous. We all know qin qi shu hua as a art form, so a Chinese standard scholar need to know about, but due to economic reasons or any other reasons, cultural reasons, Chinese people used to be more recognized to the guzheng or flute as a Chinese traditional instrument rather than guqin. So after the Chinese economic booming, especially after the 21st centuries, Chinese people was trying to, especially the people from the mainland region, crazy newly rich people, had the time and resources put on to other code art forms, including guqin, and also the incense, xiangdao, which is even very unreasonable for me, just burning money with the incense, but still, of course, smelling the good aroma and have this great atmosphere and for our own emotion or just the enjoyment is good. It's good. And that these kind of the emergence of the combination between tea and other tea art forms is also a symbol for the Chinese people that drinking tea is no longer just a hydration need, just not another drinking habits for like just like drinking water, or simply the water is not drinkable or the water is not tasty. Just you need to drink the tea to make your life, to make your drinking easier. And now, after the 1990s, Chinese people, especially the also not really especially, but just including the mainland Chinese people, we have now the money to enjoy tea instead of or tasting tea instead of just drinking it for just release the thirst or somehow. And during this era, there are also still new instruments to emerge, not just the Renaissance back to the old times. Of course, there's still innovations, like what we can see from the left picture is the traveling tea sets. These this 2 cups and 1 infuser can also be can be packed into one little package. This is a very interesting tea drinking way for younger generation, for modern generation, or for modern people, because you can take this tea to anywhere else. But of course, as lazy as I am, I would not take this. This is way too complicated. You have to wash a lot of things. Of course, it's very useful for someone who's trying to taste tea very carefully and still want to maintain their lifestyle standard during business trip or somehow other traveling. And from in the middle is a new
We'll do this on the high-speed train, right? Sometimes
yeah.
I used to sit on high-speed train. It's really cool. Yeah, and of course the side handle is also for people who do not want to mess with the handling of Gaiwan, which has no handle and boiling water. And all trains have hot water and boiling water in China. I often say, like there are places in China that might not even have a public bathroom, but everywhere you go, no matter how small it is a location, no matter how rural a bus station it is, there's always boiling water available. And over the time, you just come to appreciate that aspect.
Yeah, it's very surprisingly, in fact, I found about drinking hot water for Chinese people, this being encouraged only as recent as the mid-20th century. Before that, Chinese people don't really care about drinking the cold or the boiling water.
Oh,
that's very interesting. And now, of course, and in the middle picture, this is a new convenient tea brewer. This is an instrument, and this is a utensil that actually going popular with the new innovation of one successful new innovation tea type named Jinjunmei, a very slender and tender black tea that been processed in the Tongmu Guan also.
So yeah, the same place for Jingshan Xiaozhong. Yeah, they actually kind of compete for the same raw material, basically. Yes. Yeah. So if you ask why Jingshan Xiaozhong, even though it was already why the price keep going up, is because now it has a competitor.
Yeah, a great competitor. Jinjunmei's birth actually raised the tea price for the black tea in Tongmu Guan. I think raised from 2,000 top grades for the top grades for 2,000 from 2,000 to 20,000 at least. Yeah, that was a crazy time. But still, and yet, I think it gave us another way of making tea or enjoying tea with new convenient source. Because this tea utensils have a set of utensils. You can use this filter and also a brewer inside, and using the lid as a setting vessel, and you can just lift the tea from the tea brewer and control the concentration for the tea, and it's easier for drink and very convenient. And of course, the third one, which is basically a mug, but it has a new innovation thoughts for this. First, we can see the lid can be held onto the edge of the cup, and also
I thought this was so cool. I've been wanting to. One thing with its traveling mugs is I have no place to put my lid, especially on high-speed trains and stuff. I do not want to put my lid on the table.
And the only reason that stops me from buying this cup, this identical cup I found from the teaware store, is that's very expensive because this one actually uses technology for the Renaissance for Ru Yao, special porcelain special porcelain product from Song Dynasty, the 12th century. Yeah, the 11th to 12th century, very famous one, so-called 5 famous porcelain product in Song Dynasty. So it's very expensive. It's this one, identical one is very expensive. Of course, they have the cheaper ones. And other reason stop me from buying this is just laziness. I'm just too lazy to do this. I don't really care how I use my tea because in my everyday life, drinking tea is just easy. But somehow, of course, we still have our different drinking style. It's a very rich, the drinking style can be very richness for in recent contemporary time. It's very freedom. You don't have to follow one style, you can have all the styles you want. First of all, of course, the still existing one is 煮茶 boiling. The picture we saw here is a very recent picture I found on the internet showing the scenery of Inner Mongolian people drinking milk tea. And their milk tea have to will have the related to the boiling tea in a big pot and using the milk to combine together and keep boiling very long time, and until the milk and tea have been infused very close together, and it's very creamy and very tasty. And of course, they're using the meat, and this is I think the Chinese Mongolian cheese. And also other very tasty ingredients together. Almost this is a welcoming how to say ritual for the guests from distant part away. For my I used to visit in a Mongolian city named Chifeng to my relatives there, and they gave us this similar hot, very warming welcome for the guests from Xi'an city where I live with my family, my parents together, and my grandparents. So they give us a very warm welcome, similar to this, but not exact same, but similar. A great pot of the milk tea and other ingredients, including the meat, lamb and the cheese and other ingredients like the peanuts and other nuts. It's very tasty. So the boiling tea or 煮茶 style is now mostly adopted still by the minority people, but it's now tasting better and better. Maybe more close to our taste. And of course,
somebody commented that this looks like hot pot. That's actually my thought as well, especially with the plate of meat next to it. It definitely looks like there's actually a style of hot pot where people would use soy milk instead of water. I was like, it definitely looks like that. Yeah, but it's actually tea instead. And then keep in mind in Mongolia, and people also still drink the tea with milk, but with salt and millet. So toasted millet and salt, and then tea. So it's very much similar to like the yak butter tea in Tibet. It's basically like a salted version of milk tea. And when I went to Inner Mongolia, that's what I had. Yeah.
Oh, I don't taste
the express version you can buy in many in the grocery store as well. I have some of my Mongolian friends will like give me those. It's almost like the instant coffee version, but it's the instant milk tea. And sometimes when I was in college, sometimes I have friends visiting and they just saw milk tea and they open it and drink. They're like, why is this salty? Because they thought it was the Taiwanese style of milk tea where it's sweet.
Bubble milk tea. That's not. I think that's a beauty part of Chinese culture, that we are so diverse. They're so diverse. from the Mongolian part of the drinking style of 煮茶 boiling is like salt and milk tea, and for the southern west part, like Yunnan province, there are some minorities will have the how to say, the tea for salads, 就凉拌茶. Yeah, dressing with those vinegars and the spices, and just eating the raw tea leaves with dressings together. It's very tasty as well, but sour and spicy. And also there are some people like in Kejia Hakka people, they're drinking tea or they're taking tea in the Lei Cha style, also salted, but it's with the ingredients including the ginger and the soy powders and other ingredients or sesames. Very tasty as well, but totally different. Yeah, and also pao cha style, of course, for nowadays, and steeping. But despite the just similar steeping methods, there are two concepts of drinking tea in modern times in China, especially with daily drinking. One kind of is like this left ones using the gaiwan cup and trying to separate water and the tea to separate water and tea, control the concentration of tea, and also share into little cups, like what we can see in the major cities in China, Shanghai, Guangzhou, Shenzhen, and also in Beijing, other major cities. And cosmopolitan people are more familiar to this way of drinking, like using the small sipping cups. But in other cities or in the occasion for daily drinking, such as myself, drinking tea is much easier. Only one glass cup is okay. I'm sure they can also relate to that since you visit a lot of places in China's tea producing region.
Yeah, and also, yeah, especially in rural China, and I would say it's very much still true for green tea and yellow tea that people more often uses glassware to drink the tea. And it's usually not covered, so it's open vessel. People just sip it from the glass. It's not in the teapot either. And I would say, for example, even in Kimon, in like 2012, 13, when I first visited, they still only have the glass cups for drinking the tea, and they didn't know what a gaiwan was, but people do learn very quickly because we now in a time where information do get exchanged very rapidly, more rapid than ever before, and also trends travel really fast as well. So Kinmen basically quickly realized they're like the only red tea region that doesn't use a gaiwan, and I would say starting from 2015 was when people start using gaiwan, but it's very clumsy. And but in the past 2 years, I mean, people locally, they will still drink the tea only out of a glass, also just because it's so convenient. But when they have guests over, they'll start brewing tea with a gaiwan. So you literally see this trend setting in just in front of your eyes. But if you go to some of the green tea regions, people still don't know what a gaiwan is, especially if you go to rural China where you talk to a farmer. On the other hand, if you go to Oolong region, I think it's almost taboo if you just put the tea in the glass and drink it that way. The gaiwan style. Right, it's so deeply embedded in their tea culture, so it's very regional based as well. Yeah, of course, teapot is just so convenient, it's always there. And don't forget the big pot tea that we talked about earlier. Big pot tea still remains very popular. Yeah, it's so convenient, and it's usually symbolized the tea is cheap, so it's set this very welcome aurora around it, like it's like people can just go up and ask, can I have a cup of tea, if they see a big teapot, because they assume that's something that's very affordable and is for everyone to drink.
Yeah, but I think sadly the big pot cup tea, I only experienced it in Beijing city for recent years, because every other city I travel, including the northern part of China, there are so many tea stores. You can just walk into anyone and they will give you the small sipping cups and just welcome you to sit down and using the gaiwan cup and fair mark together. Similar as I've seen every yeah,
for sure. Yeah, because in the big cities, like it's like no one is so eager to project a ordinary or common image. But in small towns in China or rural China, yeah, some of the restaurants and places they'll have the big pot tea ready, or for their workers they'll make big pot tea is almost like a complimentary tea. It's so interesting, even in Wishan, they always have the big pot tea ready for the tea pickers and porters, but they'll treat their guests with the gaiwan beret. So you can even nowadays you can see the different treatment through the tea as well.
All right, it's a lot. Oh, and also third, and in the first talk and the second talk, some audience of us, some audience of us used to ask about the cultural renaissance for the Chinese tea industry, for Chinese tea culture, and including major Chinese culture, like from Renaissance to dedicated to the Song dynasties or Tang dynasty styles. And of course, there are lots of efforts trying to there are lots of efforts since the video clips that we saw in the first talk. It was, of course, photographed by the modern people. So yes, there are a lot of a big trend for people trying to rediscovering the lost Chinese tea drinking style, like Jiancha style and Diancha style. But we can see there are some sort of limitation for this. First of all, the tea product is almost changed and almost lost, and we cannot recreate the same flavor as they do as they did in the Tang dynasty and Song dynasty, which is 12 centuries ago and 10 centuries ago. That's basically impossible. But the reason it's being welcomed so much to cultural renaissance and to back to Jiancha style, Diancha style, it's just like with the Chinese people, Chinese society, the whole general Chinese society had this economic booming, that people trying to rediscover their own cultural root from based in our traditional culture. Since we have so many literature documentaries about the Chinese tea drinking styles from Jiancha and Diancha, of course, the modern people will put in their own imagination to this. And of course, sometimes it causes a lot of inaccuracy. See, like in the left picture, the lady who is a tea artist wearing a completely wrong clothes, as you said, completely wrong ones to make the Jiancha style. And of course, they should not have the fair mark. It should not. So I would not just encourage my students trying to rediscover or recreate their own way of Jiancha style or Diancha style, but I will warn them to not make this, the wormhole things, and to just start a wormhole and setting the new things back to the ancient times. There's no such thing like that. Of course, we should never stop this requesting for the old ancient cultural form or somehow, but don't let it become the, how to say this, halfway did recreation. Of course, the accuracy is very hard to get. But still trying to make it, or just to try experiences. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, well, maybe once we reopen, we can also, together with your guys' help, try to recreate something at Tea Drunk as well. Yeah, I think, what Wenqian means is there's a difference between attending a Renaissance fair versus, try to live your everyday life now as somebody from that era. Yeah, so same thing. Yeah, but I think, do this occasionally is really fun. Yeah.
Yeah, and the Jiancha tea is very, very unpleasant. It's not at all. Remember, try the matcha with only tea, with only salt as an ingredient. It's very unpleasant. It's not very pleasant at all, even for my taste. I'm bizarre taste for Chinese people already. Oh, sorry. And of course, during this new development of tea art form, there's still to develop two branches of tea art forms. One tea art form should not be named as tea art form, is like just tea drinking for convenience, for this looking for convenience, is for efficiency. So like some Chinese people, especially the workers or the white scholar, the workers and officers or who live in the major city, choosing for the convenience of drinking tea, they embrace the tea bags a lot. and they like to know for the newbies and the new teas and the teas from abroad, and only making tea for drinking. This is what we call tea drinking. Different styles, different new progresses, even the, how to say this, automatic tea making machine I used to use in Shanghai, city where I used to live.
Yes, yeah. I know someone is developing this complete like a machine where you only need to sit at a location, like a tea table, and the table will open up itself, start setting it up, boil the water, brew the tea, and slide the cup in front of you. Yeah, it's quite amazing too. But it's also, I think as a tea lover, it's also just amazing that, you know, I love tea in my ways, but there's somebody else that loved tea also so much that decided to create this whole, you know, robotic system just for tea drinking experience. I think it's fascinating.
That really is fascinating. But that was for the daily drinking and for convenience, and also the new high fashionable things. But there are another Chinese tea experiences like that for the real Chinese tea art, 中华茶艺. Well, what I taught my students as a course for the tea program students. This is the class or the course I try to teach my students who are also the tea program students, to notice that there are still another way of enjoying your tea is with a cultural experience. That is what we call tea art. And this art form is newly rediscovered or newly definited by back to the 1970s. So this still kind of like in a new art form, and in this developing to nowadays, this is kind of become a tea drinking methods or tea drinking styles with artistic experiences, like setting the tea tables and setting the sing for tea, and setting stories, and designate the music background music for the tea drinking event. And I took one of my students' work as a example for you guys to show, to watch. This is actually a competition work.
Yeah, so in these kind of competition, the students are asked to basically create a whole coherent narrative around why they decided to come up with this new way of doing tea. Yeah, innovation, but together with like a storytelling.
于是便去请教关系好的老师，老师送了我2朵玫瑰花，说平时喝茶，这次也许会有不一样的感受。泡花用100度的水，泡茶要用80到90度的水，用泡花的水准确到适合再泡茶，岂不是一举两得？这是我爱喝的茶，温润秀丽，隐隐闪着金色毫光的秦门功夫红茶，正是世界有名的高香红茶。 另一边是来自西亚的大马士革玫瑰，飞尾冲泡，已有花香悄然散出。这让我渐渐忘记地缘政治、一带一路。我是个学生，感觉国家大事有点遥远，只觉得玫瑰香遇到奇门香，真不知是谁能盖过了谁。闻着手上干花的香，我忽然有些出神。为什么花和茶一定要争一个高下？当今世界的主题是和平与发展，花与茶同呼吸，共命运，一东一西都是自然的恩赐，并无分别呀。沸水入花，瞬间便芬芳四溢，既有花香，又透着蜜香。喝了玫瑰花的水，轻轻地唤醒似乎睡着的雁。 滋味水，花香、东风茶韵都呈现在这小小的茶桌上，缔结不过是理解、尊重双方的特质。花香闻自茶汤，带茶汤带着花香，每一口都温醇至极，连回味里都带着玫瑰的芬芳。大概这才是一带一路真正的样貌。以后再没有关山难渡，只有四海相逢。
Okay. I just found I missed
I
a part
really
of it.
enjoyed the video. I really like the narrative.
Oh, 卡住了. So this is my so far my sharing about the tea drinking style in Chinese throughout history, from the ancient Tang to the contemporary drinking. So probably we should go to the Q&A session because it's kind of like still over time. We're not very time budgeted people, always stalling.
Yeah. Yeah, so let's now take questions. So you can either, I'm now gonna allow you to unmute yourself if you choose so. Just keep in mind, if you do ask a question with your voice, it'll be recorded, or you can type the question in the chat function. You know, since we already have a lot of chats and I can't really keep up with everything. So if you have a question that we haven't addressed, please, you know, feel free to type it in the chat. And Wenqian, thank you so much for doing this again. Now we have finally finished our 3-part journey. Definitely took longer than what we thought, but I think it's also very thorough and we covered so many things.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, everyone. All right. I guess if we don't have any questions.
I guess the only question I can have is that, to sum up, contemporary people usually just pretty much drink grandpa style, correct?
Yes, for everyday drinking.
Yeah, and also I think it has a lot to do with the lifestyle of the person. Just like, you know, in every culture, in China, you have also have people who always want to be, you know, more ritualistic about things, you know, always want to look nice, always do things to the max, maybe perfectionists as well. And then these are probably the people who will always insist on doing the more almost elaborate, like a more tedious way of brewing tea. But then on the other hand, you have people who don't really care, you know, who will use a bowl or a mug to drink tea. And then you have, you know, a lot of people that's kind of in between as well. So yeah, so it's very, it's I would say it's actually very similar. In all, I would say Chinese people would focus much more on the tea itself, how the tea tastes, where the tea comes from, and the brewing style really should serve the purpose of the tea, right? So basically, if you, no matter how fancy you brew the tea or how poor you do that, if the, you know, if the tea doesn't taste good, it kind of just like defeats the very purpose. I think in that aspect is very similar to the wine culture. Of course, certain setup and certain wine glasses, the material, all these kind of things adds to the experience. But at the end of the day, is how does the wine taste? And I think for a lot of casual people, you know, like sometimes I hang out with my friends who have very low budget, or if we're like hiking and stuff, I totally don't mind, you know, having my cheap wine poured in a plastic cup, just because, you know, the purpose was different. So I think there's purpose that's different due to the occasion, or purpose that's different just because what kind of person you are.
Yes.
Oh, there is a question. When did glass teaware start being used? I'm gonna ask Wenqian in a second as well, but I will say I do not know exactly which year, you know, glass teaware being start being used, but bizarrely, glass definitely is not something traditional in Chinese culture, which is very strange because we have things very similar to glass, and the techniques is there. I will say the most widely usage of the thing that's similar to glass is actually rich people use that as roof tile, which is weird. Yeah, so it's like people encounter this high density glowing leak-proof vessel. They're like, oh, what do we do with it? Oh, maybe we should shield ourselves from the rain instead of using as a vessel. But modern days is definitely very popular. So Wenqian, do you know when we start use the glass teaware?
Sorry, my cough. Sorry. Actually, the Chinese people started to making the glass very long time ago during the what we call 战国. It's like 500 BC. During that era, even long time ago, around even long time ago than 500 BC, like already 3,000 years, the Chinese people started to acquire with the technology to make glasses, but the glasses Chinese people make is totally different from the like the ancient Roman glass or the like a Persia glasses, based on the different type of the mineral we had, or the mine the mine of the stone we had. It's totally different. And for Chinese people, there are crystal tea cups being found in the in Tang Dynasty tombs. Just what we had saw in the first talk about the Tang Dynasty tea drinking style with Jiancha style, and the relics we found in the Famen temple, burial palace. The relics we found then, alongside with the gold and silver tea sets, also there were glass teacups, but that one is imported from the Central Asian countries. Then was now known as probably the Persia, Iran and Iran and Iraq area. This is imported to Chinese people, to Chinese government. But I need to correct one idea. One idea that Shuna just said about the glass or the glass tiles. Those ones are actually not glass at all. Those are still the clay tile, only glazed with transparent glaze. So it looks like glass, or Chinese glass we call the liu li or yao yu. But Chinese glasses for a long time period through the 500 BC to 1840s, there are still the untransparent tea glasses. They made only for accessories or jewelries to replace the jade, or what we call the yao yu, means like the imperfect jade, which is yao yu, like Chinese people would call it. Those only for jewelries and accessories, not for tea, not for living utensils or just drinking utensils. And all the crystal and the transparent glasses utensils were actually imported from Central Asian states, or the European states, or Western European states, countries, brought back to China by the Western powers. In the later in the Grand Voyage era, and the first what we call 平板玻璃, which is the modern glass factory, was built in China in the early 20th century, imported by the nationalism party regime. So this is a very recent utensils Chinese people actually use, and before the grand economic booming. Especially for the local for the Chinese mainland area before the 1960s, Chinese people do not really use that much of the glass vessels, including glass cups or glass bowls and other using living utensils, not just about tea. And for using tea cups, especially the transparent see-through tall glass cups, we now use very majority teacups we now have. It's only very recent actually. And in my childhood, if I remember correctly, probably the vast or the mass production for the transparent glass cups in China can only date back to late 1970s, 80s. Because as my very limited memory for the late 80s and 1980s and 1990s, early 1990s, my family owned a lot of like what we call 搪瓷缸, like the porcelain glazed iron cups and other. Yeah. Those ones are unbreakables, basically unbreakables, and still also repairable. And compared to the glass cups, were actually very fragile. So we don't really use that much. And for my personal experiences using the glass cups, as far as I recall, is like only after the mid 90s. So it's quite recent years thing. Yeah, but of course for the guesting or welcoming ceremonies or welcoming rituals for the government or other very formal occasions, the glass cups can be found much earlier than the recent and then the local citizens' families' lives. It's kind of different story, but still very recent. Can no more dating back to the early 20th century.
Yeah. And I would say the kind of porcelain glazed metal cup, those are still very, very popular in China. And people would have basins with them as well. I would say it's almost it's still like very popular in China, especially in like schools and in military, just because how durable they are. It's also very representative of an era. There's a restaurant close by the tea house called Mala Project. They actually serve their beverages using those cups. So I don't know if you're not Chinese, maybe you kind of didn't get why they use that, including their painting or decor, because they're trying to have a kind of an old school Chinese feeling to it. So that's why they're using those porcelain glazed mugs for drinks. Yeah. So if you know in the area, you should go there, and it's excellent food as well, but also try their mug.
No, and also I used to I have laid my eyes on some cultural renaissance recreation product of the porcelain glazed metal cups, and now it is being made for pure porcelain, but shaped into that shape, and also patterned with the cultural revolutionary patterns. Now people thinking as a trend.
Yeah, I know, but those are actually I know in Shanghai a lot of people buy those as souvenirs as well. Yeah, but it's actually it defeats the purpose of being durable. Now if it drops, it basically breaks.
Yeah. Ron from Toronto, Ontario, Canada. What is the status of the 10 Ren Tea Company?
Oh, please, who cares?
10 Ren Tea companies?
10 Ren Tea Company.
Okay, yeah. So 就天福天人. Yeah. I think people have so 天福天人, they're actually very, very large tea companies. I would say if you include their overall asset, they are probably the world's largest tea companies. They're also very much at the forefront of tea biotech products like concentrations, tea extract pails and things like that. So they also have they founded universities and stuff. Yeah, so they're actually I don't know like the details of like what the question really is about, but I do know a lot of people ask me if it's a small business. No, it's literally the world's largest tea company. Yeah.
In the China.
Thank you.
Yeah, and also by the way, the company has a operation that's in mainland China called Tianfu, and then they also have operation in Taiwan, and then in overseas called Tianren. But I mean, obviously, I think it's a public company, right? So it is a public traded company. So the ownership is not one person or that simple. But basically, these two companies are together. So Tianren and Tianfu, they're just two brands of kind of same company. Yeah.
Where can I get great tea in Toronto, Ontario, Canada?
Sorry, that's all.
I actually did not know. Yeah, sorry, I could not help with that. Yeah, maybe someone in the audience can comment on that. Yeah, all right. All right, and we have another question. what was the question? Oh, how did okay, so how did the Cultural Revolution impact tea drinking and I guess tea production?
Well, surprisingly, according to my own study from for the records and governmental documentaries in reserved in Anhui provinces, there are actually very little impact on tea producing during the Cultural Revolution era because during that 10 years, despite the huge chaos and influenced thousands of people's personal lives, but for tea industry, which is then still state controlled, strictly according to planned economic scheme, it was not changed. It was not influenced that much. It was steadily growing up during that 10 years in the very steady, not very high pace, but still increasing pace, very steady. And the tea that was called collecting price directly from the were made by the tea company and to the government to the tea farmers are still steadily growing up. The real crushing after and during the contemporary time of China's history after the foundation of PRC is actually the Great Leaping Forward era, because during that 3 years from 1957 to 1960, only 3 years on very scientific way of producing, chasing the great volume actually hurt the tea industry, hurting the tea product producing greatly, much greater than the Cultural Revolution era. Because during that time, the tea industry is actually controlled by the government directly. It's very important exporting good, so it have to be protected and have to be controlled to make it still steadily growing up. And very interestingly, Chinese people never stopped drinking tea during the Cultural Revolution era. Every drinking habits.
For a lot of places, it's actually still a rationed product, right? So basically, all the tea production gets gathered and then allocated to I guess people in the region who really cannot live without tea. So yeah.
Really closely to the disputing plan making by the central government by then during the 1960 to 1976. During that era, the disputing plan is still same way as they used to did in the first 5-year plan from 1953 to 1957. So the Chinese government, central government, tried to correct the mistake they made in the Great Leap Forward era. And for tea industry specifically, it worked well actually. And still there are a lot of tea manufacturers maintained by the tea companies and factories, and still passing down generation to another younger generation, and those tea workers learned during the Cultural Revolution era actually became the first entrepreneurs in tea industry after the free marketing reform during 1984. And of course, people will ask how the Chinese tea culture experienced. Well, let's make this clear that let's say this way, that tea culture is never the culture for everyone. It's kind of culture for wealth and culture for enjoyment. So during that era, eating food or getting full or getting enough nutrition for everyone is still struggling. So I don't really think there's a room for discussion of the tea culture for every people. Then also that's why there's a huge rebound after the economic booming and after the open gate policy and the economic reforming.
Yes, for sure. I mean, I think for throughout this course, we have known that in history, basically, tea is definitely a luxury product. So whenever you have war, instability, or economic downturns, people are just less interested in tea because it's not as well as food and lodging and clothing, things like that. However, on the other hand, tea is also in Chinese culture is the symbol of wealth, of class, but more important, more than any of those, is actually the symbol of education, of culture, of virtue. That's the thing. It's the virtuous strength for the virtuous people. So back in the days, a person, you know, that's why you see that it's the people who drink tea is either the very wealthy class, or it might be a poor artist or a poor writer. So it's not really just wealth related. So, but regardless, it's still the elite of the society. That's kind of tea represent almost like this shared image they have, that they all think they're more virtuous than the commoners. And even nowadays, a lot of criticism about the Chinese, you know, kind of renewed tea culture is that a lot of the newer rich, right, still using tea as a projection of how cultured they are, and it gives people this this sense that I am more virtuous than you are. It's almost like a competition of in that sense. So you know, I heard somebody once said, drinking tea is almost like the quickest image you can project out there to just quickly let the other person know that I am a cultured and virtuous person, just with the mere either action or saying that I am a tea drinker instead of, I guess, a connoisseur of other sort. So yeah, so that also just add on to, you know, what Wenqian said about the tea culture development during these you know, downturns of history, and also through my you know, because I'm in the front line a lot. So when I was talking to people in these traditional tea regions, usually there are two consents. One is they actually say the best teas, the last period of where the best teas are produced were actually during the period of planned economy. Just because there was like in a way, I guess it's not business smart, and that was exactly the point. At the time, people would produce tea, adhere to a standard instead of you know, trying to either maximize production or try to make usage of the more inferior material. You know, I remember the Guapian you know, farmer, they were saying at the time, they just actually throw away a lot of tea material just because it didn't make the cut. You know, they were only asked everybody to sort out and use the best ones to make tea, and everything else can just be dumped. A second thing is a lot of actually the tea region that continues to make tea during that time is either a very, very large tea region that's definitely deemed as economically more important, either for exportation purposes or, you know, just for to meet certain demands. Yunnan is actually a very good example. Or it's actually the most traditional tea region. So if a tea region continued to make tea during Cold Revolution, it's actually some of the best locations. Not only because their tea is so good, it's also because they had no other choice, because if their land is so good for tea, it actually means it's basically really bad for anything else. Remember, the most deprived land is what gives you the best tea. Yeah, so that's also another thing. A lot of the secondary terroir in any tea region, if they had any bit of the flat land at the time, people would have tried to plant some like food items, right? Some crops that can feed you. But the people who hold the best terroir for tea, they had no choice. Nothing else grows on that land.
This is the only economic plant they can have actually by then.
Yeah. And somebody asked, if you could only drink one tea for the rest of your life, Wenqian, what tea would that be?
Oh, it's hard. I like them all. If I had to drink one tea for the rest of my life, I would choose for my own health issue. I would choose I would choose black tea. But for my own personal taste, I would like to choose oolong tea. The North Fujian oolong tea, 大红袍, like the red rose. Yeah.
Right. So
Not suggested at all. It's only a personal choice because I like this aroma of coffee. So yeah, obvious.
you have like a heavier palate. Yeah, and for me, I said it many times. It's not really about the specific tea, so which definitely doesn't help if I had to drink this tea for the rest of my life. It's more about the quality of the tea. Yeah, I would say I definitely prefer all really, really good teas. If I had to pick one, maybe I'll choose some green tea. But I haven't set my mind on it yet. Yeah, but it's because every year, every harvest is different, and it's always for someone who's been, in the tea game for this long. I would say every year, what excites me the most are the teas that kind of really impress me, given the condition of the weather of the terroir. Of everything. So it's not about it's a Longjing. It's about that one season's very particular Longjing. It's not about the Da Hong Pao or any club tea. It's about a very special batch. Yeah.
They're a good product and it's quite similar health effect, but slightly different. So
yeah. And also people ask about the genesis of teapot. So basically, like what, when did teapot start? What is it, kind of thing? Would you mind talk a little bit about that?
For my personal observation, and I used to work in the tea store during the early of 2010. Yeah, 2010, 2009. I used to work as a tea seller in the tea stores, and I think for traditional tea regions like in Fujian province and Guangdong province, where the economic is relatively better than the other parts of China, and they started to embrace the teapot, also in Taiwan region and Hong Kong, and they started to have this habit to have teapot maybe during the late 1990s, during that time. And mostly the teapot was used to have three major features. One is like the color changing, the thermatology and color changing based on because of the chemical they have. The hot temperature, they will become like green and or other chemical color shift. And second feature is the shape, because almost teapots will only choose with the patterns or the shapes for the symbolizing Chinese cultural icons, such as the toad. 金蝉, the golden toad in Chinese, that represents the fortune of the money, and or the pigs. Pigs are being featured as Chinese culture for the longevity and prosperity as well. Yeah, that's one, that 金蝉, or 3-foot toad. Yeah, I'll also
golden coin. That's the feature.
Yeah. We'll have a coin inside of its mouth, and also that means bring the money for the tea store owners or other tea guests. And I think this related to the fortune of the money will originate from the Taiwan region and the Fujian provinces and Guangdong province and Fujian province, because that area, well, personally saying, for my personal experiences, those areas and the coastal areas for Chinese people, for China mainland or the Hong Kong and the Taiwan region, they are relatively more superstitious. They're more stick to the traditional culture symbolization for the animals and the patterns and numbers even. My personal experience is that in Guangdong or Hong Kong, there have no 4th floor, no 24th, no 14th, because the 4 number, the pronunciation of 4 number is not a good luck symbol. And the third one major feature for the teapots started from the early of 21st century, is that they was made from the purple clay or zisha. because the zisha have the very interesting feature for absorbing the water, and during pouring more water over time over, the teapot will have the unique lace similar to the what we call yanghu, the nurturing process from the teapot, zisha teapot. So they will have the better look, or progressively better look. So that's what I know about the teapot. And also, of course, besides the fortune or superstitious cultural destination, there are still other cultural impressions for the teapots, like the spider and the foot. Because in Chinese, it's called 知足, means like people who easily be content and be happy for the simple life. So there are lots of things.
Yeah. And also, the teapot makers for like a purple clay, they kind of always had this, I wouldn't even call it a tradition. It's just, you know, every time you make a teapot, you always have to take more than what you need. Because I mean, if you don't take more than what you need, then you're kind of stuck. And so you're always gonna have some kind of leftover clay. A lot of times the clay, especially in modern time, the coloring is using a formula, which means you cannot recreate the exact same color. So you can't really use one batch of clay for the other. So people just use an object, like make an object with that. So that's kind of like the I guess a part of the tradition for that as well.
So my question is queued up right after that question.
Sorry.
Oh, sorry. Sorry, I was talking. I didn't hear there was a question. Could you just repeat that, please?
Yes. Could you please comment on the use of the tea bowl? Did it originate in Japan, or has it been in China for a long time?
So the tea bowl, 茶碗. Yeah, if it's originated in Japan or China, have been using it for a long time.
Oh, I think the tea bowl, the concept of tea bowl actually originated from China, from Tang Dynasty, 12 centuries ago, from the mid 7th century, from the mid 8th century, originated from the two famous porcelain making area, like in Zhejiang province, then known as Yueyao, and the Hebei province, then known as Xinyao. And that utensils were also being sent as gift to the Japanese emperor and empress, like Cuole Nü Tianhuang, and then later brought back to Japan by the monks, by the scholars, by the scholars, and to recreate their own, or not recreate, like to experience the gift from the from China country, from the like regime from the Tang and the Song dynasty, who also have the communication. And the tea bowl that Japanese start using now has already featured with their own culture feature. It's completely different from what Chinese people had in Tang and the Song dynasty. So I think if you specifically mentioned about Japanese tea bowl, the shape and the different, the color and the different processes are definitely originated from Japan. But the concept of using a tea bowl for drinking tea, and the earliest tea bowl, definitely tea utensils, specific utensil, tea utensils are originated from China.
So are people using the tea bowl now?
Chinese,
I think there might be a little confusion on like what is a tea bowl for. So tea bowl is first and foremost is just a bowl. And back in the days in Tang Dynasty, when people boil tea, they were proportioning, you know, the liqueur of the tea into these bowls. So this also has to do with the tea culture at the time. There was no teapot. And then in Song Dynasty, which is very similar to what people do with matcha now, people will use bowls to whisk the tea. And then later on, when we start to drink loose leaf tea, you still have to pour the tea out to somewhere, but you then see the emergence of teacups, right? It's getting smaller and smaller. I would say, you know, teacups is definitely, style-wise, is definitely draws a lot of inspiration from wine vessels. However, the purpose is just for basically keeping like something to hold the liqueur in. And in China, there's still, especially in the big pot tea culture, there's still a lot of people using like a bowl. But somehow people think using either gaiwan or a smaller teacup is the more elegant way to do it. Using a bowl suggests that you had to drink really quickly. There's like an implied chugging going on, which is considered kind of foul in comparison to slowly sipping your tea. But this kind of impression of the tea bowl really has nothing to do with how people back in the days using bowls to drink tea, where of course you have to use bowls to drink tea because tea started out as a soup. Yeah, so this is kind of the thing. It's not designed. It's kind of just kind of came to be, I guess.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much.
Yes, of course. Are there any attempts to reproduce the Song Dynasty style tea cakes? I actually do not know any.
I witnessed some.
Yeah.
I used to see some product or more like experimental product, because it's not economic bargaining actually. For the Song Dynasty, they have the certain pattern for like the phoenix, and of course that is those what were actually being passing down by the documentaries, the royal court's family tea cakes. There are some experimental product, but it's not for sale. It's only for experimenting and people trying to experience the cultural renaissance for the Song Dynasty's tea cakes. I don't really find any mature tea product for business. Not yet. Yeah. If you want to customize, made some batch for yourself, it's possible, but it's very costly and maybe not very tasty as you think it would be.
Yeah, and I can imagine the difficulty because in China, even though we have many tea regions, very large tea production, you think that people can just spare some tea leaves and make it into the Song style tea cakes. But even other than the pressing, it's very rare in China for people to steam the tea leaves now. It's only limited to, from what I know, just that one region, right? And then so that's the region that you still have all the facilities, the techniques, the overhead and everything that is needed for steaming the green tea. But that region does not press tea. So it's just hard to get everything all together, from the facilities to the people, the technique, the whole processing step. And then after one finally bring everything together, who's gonna buy them, right? So yeah, so I think that's probably why there's no such case yet.
Yeah.
Or cases that we know. Maybe somebody already doing that out there. Yeah.
Yeah, Shunan and Wenqian, I just wanted to say thank you guys so much. This has been so valuable to all of us that are studying Chinese tea culture. And I just have a really quick question. I mean, I think a lot of us are studying Chinese just to have access to some of this very valuable information. I know there's lots of university papers and studies and books, but for those of us that are not, it's going to take several years for us to be able to read these kinds of materials. When we go to different places in China, like like Yunnan, or if you go to Meijiawu and you go to the Zhejiang Daxue, Chaya Yanjiusuo, and you guys there in Anhui, is there any efforts to provide some kind of like a internship or any, even if it's like a basic or introductory university level course at all as far as tea culture or tea tasting goes in English, or is the only way to access that by learning Chinese and being able to go and take those courses there?
Well, it really is a great advice for us to make new English courses for the beginners of learning Chinese culture. But sorry, we don't really have that yet. Maybe in the future years, I will try to have my colleagues together and trying to push up something to online things. And unfortunately, as far as I know, maybe not. But I have this one little advice for you to go probably some tea expert in Hong Kong. They will have this online courses. Maybe not China mainland university level learning, but they will give you a lot of tea experiencing video clips or some materials in a YouTube or somehow. That's great advice for now. Since we already have so many how to say this. We already have so many good things to share, but very pitifully we don't have this yet enough resources to put all this in English. We're trying, and for my program at my school, one Professor Wan Xiaoshun is trying to launching a new Chinese tea book that was an introduction to more than 230 kinds of tea, Chinese tea. But it's only a book. We are trying to launching new video clips or somehow, but sorry, we will try to make it forward.
In the meantime, anytime you guys want to organize anything like this, it's super valuable. Even if it's something, I know this is very broad and we're trying to just scratch the surface, but I think all of us are just taking notes like crazy because there's really not any literature to access. So just thank you guys so much. It was really good course.
Oh, yeah. And also I know that sometimes if there's a sizable group of people, sometimes universities will offer like a crash course or tours, but still it's not going to be as in depth as an actual class in a very specific topic, because in universities, given any class, you might feel that it's super focused. So that's the whole purpose of it, because people will spend 4 years, 6 years, right, 8, 10 years studying these kind of things. So a crash course might not do the whole justice, but still will give a very good overview of it. But I think you kind of need a sizable group for the schools to do that. And another thing is also, like Wenqian said, there are resources limit as well. Not all professors are able to teach the class in English. So how would the course be taught? And but I know that I saw an open course by Dai Qingying老师, Chinese, right? So I think that's a big step forward. So basically, a key professor on tea evaluation from Anhui Agricultural University, she just posted a open course on tea evaluation, but it's in Chinese. But I saw it was very well received because it's not just in the English world. I think even in China, a lot of the younger scholars do try to step out and then bridge with the broader audience outside of the limit of universities. And yeah, so maybe that was just the first step, and next time we can have that in English or something like that. And also the National Tea Research Institute, they actually offer some tours. So yeah, so I know it's not the same as like a course or anything, but I think even just having a tour there to see how they go about doing their research and the collections they have there is still pretty amazing. Yeah. Cool. And somebody asked me a question. For the purpose of tea collection, selection at Tea Drunk, what criteria do you use to define a traditional tea? So this has to do with the classifications of tea based on, I guess, their prestige. So you basically have historically famous teas, historical teas, but not historically famous teas. The difference is one was endorsed by past connoisseurs. The other one, the land is old, but the tea that was produced there was not heavily endorsed by past connoisseurs. You also have currently famous teas, and usually it's kind of associated with price So you do see it's becoming very, very popular, a lot of money going after these kind of teas. And then you have what they call the fine teas, artisanal teas. Somebody asked in the chat before, what's the percentage of Chinese artisanal teas versus the more mass-produced teas? Actually, last time I checked, was there like 40% of the teas were classified as the artisanal teas, but not all of these come from the specific terroir that will be classified as the historic terroir. So what Qizhuang does is that, first of all, we currently only get teas from historic terroir. So these are all locations that's not new to tea. They actually have been for generations been planting the tea. But we do both historically famous teas and historical teas, mostly because we cannot avoid pu'er, which is a historical tea, but not a historically famous tea. But how can we be left out of the pu'er world? But location is not everything though. Even though the traditional locations are the most conservative, they're the slowest to adopt machineries and new techniques and stuff, but still most of the locations, they unavoidably already have some of those. So we also demand that the teas have to be made in the most conservative way possible. And then also cultivars and varietals. For most of the locations, you would also have multiple cultivars. And I know for people who, in tea science, a lot of scholars, they're super proud of a lot of the asexual cultivars. But from a tea connoisseur's perspective, we still treasure the heirloom cultivars the most. The ones that were planted from generations ago, very old tea trees with a seed. It just has a different growing cycle. I don't know if it was something that's inherently different about a heirloom cultivar, or it's just merely because they have already occupied the most desired lot of land, and also they have been on this land for a longer time, that they're able to develop the profile that represents terroir better. But they are better. I think no one can deny the heirloom cultivar just tastes better. So we also try to get the heirloom cultivars instead of asexual cultivars whenever it's possible as well. So to me, these three factors have to meet. So basically, location, the most desired cultivar. For a lot of cases, we're almost one of the exclusive vendors who still sell heirloom cultivars. And then also the processing. But the processing is not just about, processing actually is the biggest piece, because it's not just about method. It's also a little bit about luck, and also a little bit about just the actual technique of the tea maker. Because the reason I say it depends on luck, because tea is such a product of the weather. On a rainy day, you just cannot ask a farmer to make excellent tea on a rainy day. It's just impossible. But the chance that you have the tea of the most desired lot happen to mature on this most desired day that you have decided to make tea, and that is a sunny day, and on that day the producer has had enough sleep, or just at the top of his game, full of energy, does not make a single mistake in the judgment call. When all of these come together, that's when you have really, really excellent tea. But to be honest, it does depend a lot on luck as well. But the part that what we can try and control is to first define these metrics and define these parameters, and then only get the teas within these parameters. But then the rest is, it kind of depends on the weather. All right, next. A question for Wenqian. Does your college have a public WeChat account that publishes articles about tea?
Well, I think only in Chinese, the several of them, but to be honest, I don't really read that much articles about tea from the WeChat account, official accounts.
Usually are run probably just by students, right?
Yeah, mostly usually run by the tea students, or some like my students run a tea official accounts which it's called Chazhou account or somehow belong to some associations or the big companies. They also have this need to push their products through the WeChat official accounts, but of course they will share some common sense or the knowledge about tea or tea culture. But I would take this as a great start to have some interest about tea in tea culture or somehow, but this is really off my knowledge realm. I rarely read this materials. I'm sorry, I don't really have any good recommendation. Maybe 中国茶语网，对the Tea Language Network.
Yeah. The thing is, a lot of the there are actually a lot of kind of online media that specialize in tea articles. But the thing is, you're gonna have some really good ones and then really not good ones. They're more like a compiler, or they might outsource the writing to so many different people. And of course, a lot of these articles are not peer reviewed. I'm also not sure if you want to read the research paper. It's kind of boring. But anyway, yeah, so it's gonna, for the research paper, you know, just like here in the States, a lot of them are in closed data space because there is concerns about intellectual properties and copyrights and things like that. But if you have access through an educational institution in America, maybe you can also access the database in China. Because I know in China, people in higher education networks, they can access research articles overseas. So maybe reverse is also true. So that would be the case. It's those networks are, I mean, those databases are, you know, require you to log in. And if you want to purchase individual research papers, it's kind of expensive. I think they, you know, it's protected for a reason. And then but for the more everyday writing, yeah, the one that Wenqian mentioned is one. Yeah, there are a lot of media that have articles. It's not vetted, so it's like there are good ones and not very good ones. But regardless, in terms of volume, it's actually much higher volume. That gives you so many different perspectives on tea for sure. I actually would recommend this one. This is a WeChat public account, and they it's called 岩茶教室 the 岩茶 tea classroom. So I just want to say, you know, they do write paid articles. So definitely keep that in mind. The people they interview and write about, there is a commercial interest behind that. But regardless, for their specific style of tea, I do think they have access to most of the producers of for Cliff Tea, and they do try to interview everyone. So at least you know what everyone had to say about their own tea, and also along you know, by going through that process, you are able to also get an idea of kind of what matters, what's some of the things that collectively people all think that matters for Cliff Tea. And you also might be surprised that, you know, the knowledge structure and everything in the region, because Cliff Tea region, or Wishan, I think is the most mature tea region in China right now. It's getting more and more like a wine region. So each of these producers all have the potential, I think, to become like the next great wine house kind of thing, equivalent in tea world. So so keep that in mind. And I think this is a pretty good one. It's also like a not super consistent, but I still think it's definitely worth visiting.
Yeah.
All right. Did I miss any questions? All right. Okay, thank you so much.
Welcome.
Again, anyone? Oh, did I say one more question? Here.
Okay.
Sorry, I just want to make sure I didn't mishear anything. Okay. All right. Okay, thank you so much, everyone. And then definitely lots of thanks to Wenqian for making this happen. You know, as you saw from the questions and the comments that people are so eager to know and learn, I think having, you know, your background and your, you know, teaching the class in English, I think is super valuable for everyone.
Thank you guys. I'm very honored to be invited by Shunan and sharing something I know about tea to you guys. Hopefully we will have some future talks. If you have, Shunan, if you have some other online courses in Zoom like this, I would like to attend as a student to learn something new from other tea experts. I'm not regarding myself as a tea expert. I would never call that. Just I would love to learn something new about this, and thank you very much.
So moderate. Yeah. All right. Thank you, Wenqian, and thank you everyone for joining us.
Have a good night, everyone.